Let's talk about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on youth. And to talk about this, I'm so glad to have with us Natalie Kemp. She's a licensed psychological associate and teaches as an associate professor at the University of Mount Olive in Eastern North Carolina. She's been serving as the department chair of psychology at UMO for the past 7 years and is heavily involved in community work. Prior to starting a career in academia, she provided therapy for a community health center, private practice settings, and nonprofit agencies. Her passion is working with adolescents and young adults, particularly on how adverse childhood experiences, known as ACEs, affects development and what protective factors can influence their future. With the recent creation of her REACH program, which is Resilience Education, Awareness for Coping and Hope, Natalie is working with students to promote awareness and provide education about ACEs on campuses and in the community. Natalie is inspired daily by her husband of almost 25 years, who's an educator in the public schools, and their two children who are both navigating adolescence. So, Natalie, thank you so much for joining me. You're a great person to discuss this because of your,
Thanks.
yeah. And, the pandemic has impacted many people. And
Absolutely.
there's been a lot of talk about how it's impacted specifically adolescents. And I was wondering if you could just kind of touch upon, it's been a while since I've been an adolescent or a young
Me
adult.
too.
So yeah. So I might be a little out of touch. So what is it about youth, adolescents, young adults that might make them more prone to adverse, impacts of the pandemic?
Sure. Well, the first thing I saw, to be quite honest, during that time, just being very involved with the youth in my community and my own kids, was that those kids during the pandemic who missed those traditional milestones, particularly, say, high school, senior year, all of a sudden you had no prom, no yearbook, no graduation. And so a lot of these kids, what we're seeing is, and I don't know, this is not necessarily a professional term, but they are like stuck. So many students are not sure where to go. And so I really wonder, and a lot of research is being put into, is that because they didn't go through those traditional milestones that we learn in psychology, like Eric Erickson talks about all the different stages of development, and they missed all that. Then even younger kids, you had kids who maybe didn't even enter into a school system till, first or second grade because they were quarantined during that time, or kind of away from everybody else. And so socially, we also see, whether it's young or older, them not being able to really communicate as well. We see a huge increase in social anxiety. And I've heard this across the country, not only where I am, we're in a rural area. If I try and get somebody into a therapist, it's a good 3-month wait. And I know I've heard that up north as well. So the mental health providers are just overwhelmed with the amount of students and adolescents that are just really struggling. And so I think those are some of the things that they're struggling with, is that social anxiety, and just being able to navigate that what's next, because they missed out on a lot of those things. So that's where I see a big struggle. And so some of the work that we're trying to look at in our county, I'm part of an agency called Wayne Cares, or it's a community group, but we're looking at what are those protective factors, what can we do to help kids that are experiencing trauma. And so ACEs research looks at adverse childhood experiences, and the pandemic now will be one of them that all of us have gone through, right? So when we look at ACEs, generally that's adverse childhood experiences that have happened with kids before they were 17, and then how it affects them as they're older. And so definitely the pandemic is something that has now affected everyone as a group. And so we identify some of those protective factors being like having a good support system in your life. So what we're looking at in our community is how can we connect our kids not only with families, but maybe with sports coaches, with pastors at churches, with community groups, letting the students have somebody know or let them know that there's somebody there that cares outside of their family. So that's kind of the tip of the iceberg of some of the things that we're working on here in our little county.
Yeah, and the, for me personally, uh,
Hmm.
the impact of the COVID-19 seems so minimal. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, like not being able to go to the prom seems like, well, a lot of people don't go to the prom. A lot of people haven't gone to the prom in the past, and they didn't shed a tear, or they didn't go to school because they were homeschooled, or they lived on a farm,
Hmm.
um, and they communicated absolutely fine.
Right.
So like some of these things that uh, what they missed out on, he'd be like, well, you didn't get the bonus of a prom, but would
Right.
we call that trauma? But for some kids, it sounds like it is a big deal or impacts them, because there's much bigger things, right? Going through a war or going through
Hmm.
starvation, or like those sound traumatic. And even then, people, I have friends that have lived through major wars in their country, and they are doing great. They're very
Absolutely.
resilient. So, like, just kind of in the grand scheme of humanity, yeah, what are those resiliency factors or those protective factors, where some people go through some really serious trauma, and they're very resilient. And then other people go through, I didn't get my birthday gift, and they're really upset and have social issues because of it. So like, and I know this, I don't mean to mock, I just mean that there's such extremes of like, what someone can, what their small things could impact some people in large ways, and large things could not really impact other people. So like, what does science say about what are those protective factors, and what helps someone be resilient? What is about their character, or their things in their life? And you mentioned having some good social connections.
Hmm.
Like you mentioned, even someone in your neighborhood. I know people in my life who grew up in very abusive households, and they turned out fantastic because they had one person, one adult down the street, that
Absolutely. Yeah.
they would go to their house after school. Or I know someone who, the owner of a shop took them in and helped them out. So yeah, maybe like what does science or research say about that? The protective factors, or what makes someone resilient?
Yeah, so absolutely. So the research does show, like, all it does take is that one, right? That one person to believe in them. But yeah, absolutely good point, right? So we don't want to minimize people who have, been through wars and things like that. Really, it goes back to we know about neuroplasticity in the brain. And the biggest thing that I see in resiliency, it is that ability to be able to bounce back, like after something happens. And a lot of that goes back to really just plain old, like I teach a course in applied behavior analysis, and we look at the ABCs of behavior. Like you have your behavior, but what happened before to kind of lead to that behavior, and then what happened after. So if you are kind of stuck in this, and it's really a cognitive behavioral model, if something happens and you have all these youth who are at home and they viewed it as very negative, and so their outlet really was social media, and so it perpetuated that negativity, right? And so if you have this bad thought, and this is how I explain it in my class to my kids, if I'm walking on a path, say through the a field, and there's nobody there, and so I walk through the field, and the first time I go through, I am just making that path, and then the second time, the third time, each time I go on that path, that I put the grass down a little bit more until a path is created. It is the same way with our brain. So if I have that negative thought, the first time that negative thought goes through, Our brain, that's how they handle it, right? And then if over time that becomes like a pattern, and our brain literally will go that same path. And so if I have this negative thought, and then all my friends have this negative thought, and all my social media has this negative thought, it develops this cognitive pattern of very negative thinking and very catastrophic global thinking, like everything is bad, right? So even though this one thing might be bad, we tend to then globalize it. And so luckily we do know that the brain does have that neuroplasticity, that we can change our brain, we can change our thought pattern, right? So if we can work with kids in cognitive behavioral therapy to literally change your thought process. And so, like you said, okay, so you didn't go to the prom. So what? It's not the end of the world. Lots of people don't go to the prom, but they see it as the end of the world. So how do we get them to change that thought process? Like, okay, I didn't get to go to the prom, but you know what? I'm going to go to something else, or there's some other positive thing. If you talk to a lot of young people today, they don't have a lot of hope in the future. So they see things as very, they have this dystopian worldview. They see everything negative, and they don't see maybe that positive future that we have, or that we see, or that we see that we can bounce back, right? Okay, so you were quarantined for a little while. Get over it, right? So, and I think it's also generationally, parents, I would say over the last 20 years, probably have been a lot more of that helicopter parent type versus than maybe many. When I was younger, my parents might have said, get over it, and now parents are like, oh, my poor kid, adults. So I think parenting has changed. I definitely think that kids, the way they think about things has changed, and that they do have kind of that negative global worldview. And because social media and their peers are their biggest parts of development in adolescence, and they were not able to be near them during the time of COVID, that kind of hurt them. And so all they were seeing was whatever was on social media. And let's be honest, across the world, it was a pretty bleak situation, no matter where you were. I mean, think about back when COVID started and they had that, I never watched it, but the ticker that had like the death toll. Just imagine you're a kid growing up and like that's what you're seeing on social media. That's become like a norm, right? And so yes, although people have been through horrific things and wars and things like that, they may have been groomed or taught to bounce back. And our kids are just not seeming to have that. I just saw the other day, we're in a state, one of the schools just reported their sixth suicide of the year, like already. So kids just, death by suicide, that's an option to them that seems like it's just gonna fix things. And it's
Yeah,
just,
that's a very, very high number. Yeah.
yes,
And
it's
yeah,
huge. Yeah.
and death by suicide for youth is contagious. And
Yes.
so much of
Hmm.
it, like you're talking about, so much of it has to do with uh,
Hmm.
the messaging after someone dies by suicide,
Hmm.
um, and how people respond according to the messaging around that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it does, it just, it goes back to that thought process. We can change that thought process, but if you ask most kids, or adolescents, college age kids about a future, they don't really see much of a future, or it's very blurry, very nebulous, very, well, if another pandemic doesn't take me out, or just a very negative worldview, that affects everything that they do. So so that's kind of how I feel that
Yeah.
it has been for our kids.
Yeah, so hopefully, as a society, we learn something from that, around the messaging. It sounds like the messaging is quite important. People's thoughts um, around the events that are going on, and how to respond to them. The memory
Yes.
that pops into my head when I was a young person, we had an ice storm,
Uh-huh.
and very, it's like no big deal, but today, or my kids might see it as a big deal, but so there's an ice storm, which means there's no power, there's no nothing, everything shuts down, and we were locked in our house for well, not locked in our house, but if you leave, the snow's way up to your waist and everything's covered in ice
Mhm.
for 5 days, and you had to bail water out of the basement so it wouldn't flood. We took
Mhm.
shifts at night.
Yeah.
None of us saw it as a difficult thing.
Nope.
No, it was fun. It was a
It was
great
fun.
time. Absolutely great time. You got the cans of food or whatever you can find in the house to eat. You all hung out together in the living room and took shifts bailing water, and it was fun. It was a fun time. Had candlelight. Uh yeah, but we didn't have any social media. We
Yes.
didn't have any access to TV or none of the sensational media or none of that. It was
Yeah.
family. Hey, we're all here together. Let's make the best of it.
Absolutely. Even
uh,
25 years ago when I moved here to North Carolina, there was this huge hurricane and
yeah,
everything shut down in our area. It was completely flooded. It was
yeah,
devastating. But everything was shut down. And yes, we sat and played cards and you hung
yeah,
out with your neighbors and
yeah,
it was different. And even though there was devastation and it was a horrible thing, our
yeah.
community all came together. They all helped
Come
each other.
together, help each other out with the
Yeah.
trees and yeah.
Yeah. But I don't
Uh,
see that
if
as
if
much
someone has
now.
gas in the neighborhood, you take turns going over there to get warm water.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, but
Yeah. So
and
I
not,
don't
not to
see as much of
minimize the
that.
pandemic. I mean, yeah,
Hmm.
people had to wear masks, and but yeah, the sensationalizing and the messaging probably does have a huge impact on the resilience. So in your community, what are the efforts? How is it that you are helping youth establish those good social networks and developing those predictive factors?
So what we're doing, we're in Wayne County, and
Mhm.
so this group that we have, Wayne Cares, is made up of all the agencies in the county that would deal with kids in general, any kind of services. And so what we're trying to do, we're trying to kind of break that, that chain, I guess you would say, so that when things do happen, not putting it in such a negative light, and okay, how can we band together on this? And for example, like in April, that is Child Abuse Prevention Month, like nationally. And our county is all coming together, like all the different agencies in the county, and we're all addressing resilience in a different way. So, like we have a park and we have a story walk in our park where it has like books that are out at kid eye level where parents can walk through and like read the books and stuff. So our book that month will be on resilience. Our YMCA will have a display when you walk in that talks about resilience and things you could do with your family. Our local library. So we're trying to get that all the agencies so that if you are a parent, particularly, or a caregiver in the family in the community, everywhere you go, you're seeing resilience. You're seeing how can I build this up in my kids so that I can say to them, it's gonna be okay, right? So if it starts with the talk around my dinner table and when I'm at home and when I'm in the car, then that's going to help my kids as well. If I don't have such a negative view, perhaps they won't. So we're coming together as a county. We are doing screenings of a documentary that talks about ACEs. So we're doing that in the school systems. We're doing that at churches. So we're trying to make ourselves more resilient county altogether. And so just starting at the smallest levels and kind of work up that way. So we're doing it through education, just awareness and advocacy. And then we're hoping that's going to spread out from there, right? Because I know we can't fix everybody everywhere, but we can do our part in our county to raise up our kids in a more positive light. And yes, these things are going to happen, but it's okay. You can make it through, right? And we're going to do it together. So just trying to increase that positive message with them as well.
Yeah, that sounds great. In fact that your community came together to make this an important thing, something that they're gonna work together on is so
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Yes, it's
It's,
been a we started our group in like 2021, and so just kind of trying to pull people together,
Mhm.
and we have just made great strides in that, and have been just blessed to have people really committed that want to be involved with it. Like our local pediatrics, our hospitals, our libraries, and just getting people from different groups to represent and say, hey, this is what I can do on my end. We're doing some things at my university as well, having people come in and give talks, just
Mhm.
different things that we can do to promote it all over. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So, one of the themes I get from what you're saying is having hope for the future, or being, looking forward to the future.
yeah.
Sounds like a
Hmm.
really important aspect. And I think of, stories of people that have overcome adversary, like heroes,
Yes.
people that have really thrived during difficult times. And I
Hmm.
wonder if you guys have any like short films or using
So,
stories of role models been used.
yeah, so interestingly, we did create a little video that talks about ACEs and what we're doing in our county. So we
Mhm,
had that professionally made.
mhm,
But it's funny that you say that because I teach a Psych 100 like survey course. So they're freshmen. My
mhm.
students are anywhere from 18 to 25, but most of them in that class are 18 to 20. And we were talking the other day, and I said, who are your heroes? Um, my students in both classes had no concept of what that meant. And it was very sad
And
to
this is
me.
college. This is
Yeah, this is
college.
college.
Yeah.
So I think back, I'm in my 50s, and I can think back like heroes. That was a big thing we talked about. Like,
Yes,
who's
yes,
your
it was.
heroes? And
Yes.
like, and even, sports people, history people.
Role
And
models,
when I,
mentors.
yeah, like models, mentors. And then as I kind of pressed them, they were like, I don't know, maybe my grandma, like they really
Mm,
couldn't think of. So we talked about professionally or famous people. They were
mhm.
all like, everybody famous has bad things that they do, like they
Yeah,
just
yeah.
focused on
Got
that
this great
negative.
TikTok
Yeah, I mean, it's
channel
like,
and
oh, our
yeah,
presidents are all having affairs, doing different things, like
right.
every time I was like, how about this person? They would be like, oh, do you know they do? It was just such a focus on negative. And so I was like, wow, you can't think of anybody positive. So
Yeah.
that just kind of stands out to me that this generation, it is, you say heroes, even I was like, superheroes? You don't even think of Batman? Like nothing. It's just a
Right.
different concept. And that I feel like that speaks volumes too, right? That
Mm,
they don't feel like they have these positive role models in history and politics, in sports, nothing. That maybe when I was younger, we looked at people in sports or history, or that were doing civic things. Um,
yeah.
but
Yeah. I know
students
for my
today, not so
kids,
much.
at one of my children, well, I should say the elementary schools, our youngest child, at their school, they have the book fair. So as
Uh-huh,
a
yeah.
parent, I get to go to it. And one of the books was heroes throughout the world, children heroes throughout the world.
Uh-huh.
So I think there's probably about 30 of them in the book, and they're just short stories about these individuals, countries, all sorts of countries in different time periods. Um, so at dinner time, periodically at dinner time, we'll read one of those stories.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so hopefully they're grabbing hold of it. There's been a couple times where, weeks later, one of my kids will bring up one of the stories. I'm like, yes,
Yes,
they
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 got
they,
it.
they heard the story, But yeah,
Well,
I
maybe I
remember,
need to bring.
my grandparents talking about going through the depression and
Yes.
how they
Hmm.
overcame that, and my parents things that they overcame. And you think, yeah, throughout life, there's always going to be some significant challenges, and
Right.
what do we do
And
with
it's
it?
hard, they're in this cancel culture too, right? So when I grew up, I mean, even somebody like Christopher Columbus was a hero. He
Oh,
discovered
I that's
America.
right. That's
And
right.
now all
Yes.
of a sudden, wait, no, he didn't. And
I know.
So
Yes, you're
there's,
finding out, oh, wait a second. Yeah, they were not such a great person. They
yeah. Or
they
we
did
always
this,
kind
they did
of,
this good thing, but all this other stuff
maybe
they
not
did
that.
was not
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah. So I
Yeah, so
think
that can really
that's a different
crash.
aspect too. Yeah. Because when
Yeah.
I was younger, it was like the presidents, wow, and we had a lot of bad behavior from a lot of our
Yes.
presidents. So that's what they see. Like, why would you want to be a president? Like that's a terrible thing. And I'm like, oh, so
Yeah.
so just that worldview is different. So hopefully we can change it with our younger ones, right? And create and let them see and point out the positives and
Yeah.
and that having a hero, that's a positive thing. I said to them in my class, like, wow, I hope someday you can look back and, I'm not a hero, but I hope you can look back and say, wow, there was a
Right.
positive influence. I see that with my husband. He teaches kindergarten.
Yeah.
And I just met somebody, we did an open house and the student came and they saw my name tag and they said, oh, is he your husband? And I said, yeah, he was my
Yeah.
kindergarten teacher. That was 19
Yeah.
years ago. And
Right.
they were so excited, how's he doing? Oh, he's still, he made such a difference in my life. And like, that's it. Like, oh, he
Right.
made a difference. Right. And
And
so,
that you can do it for someone else.
yes, yeah,
Right. Yeah.
absolutely.
Just like, yeah, paying it forward. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So what I'm hearing from you is what you're seeing with a lot of youth is not really being optimistic about the future,
Yeah.
and some depression and some
Yes.
kids struggling with suicidal thoughts,
Yes.
um, and really helping instill some hope and solid connections with at least, you know, a small amount of people within your community,
Yeah.
makes a big difference. And then
Absolutely.
also paying attention to the messaging that we put out there. And that's something that I think is quite a challenge. And wonder about what your thoughts are on this, because uh, media outlets, anyone who posts on the web, they're going to continue posting sensational things that are going to draw attention, that are often negative and not
Right.
helpful. That's
Hmm.
always going to happen. So, what about educating kids on how to self-monitor that and filter that information? Like for myself, when the Ukraine when the war in Ukraine began, I completely stopped looking at any news whatsoever. And I know that sounds maybe drastic and immature, but I just did not want I didn't want the weight of the sorrow of that going on my mind every day. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, teaching kids how to monitor and filter that kind of information.
Well, just my simple motto is
Mhm.
junk in, junk out, right?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
whatever you take in, that's what you're going to think. I will say the whole Ukraine. So I was in my class when the news first hit, and my students, immediately it's on their phone, quickly, quickly, and
Mhm.
they're like, "Oh, that's it, World War III. We're all gonna die." And I was like,
Right.
"Whoa, what is going on?" That's how quick they change. So they're sitting
Mm,
there in class, everything's fine, notification comes up, and I'm
yeah.
like, turn your phones over. Another thing I do in my behavior modification class is to look at, on your phone, you can see like how long you spend in all these things. Um, this is going to blow you away, but my average in my class for hours spent on TikTok, which literally, I mean,
Just
I don't know that there's
platform.
a it's a different thing, right? 9 hours a day. Yeah, I told you it's
Holy
gonna blow you away.
moly.
9 hours.
Oh
So
my
like
gosh. I mean, if
my whole
someone works a
workday.
full-time job,
Yes.
let's say 8 hours, but they're only
Yes.
actually working maybe six, right? Like
Yes.
9 hours
Yes, that's the
on
average. Now
one platform.
I have some students 12, 15 hours a day
Oh my
on TikTok. And
goodness.
so I'm saying
That
to
is
them,
incredible.
yes, yes. And I tried to explain to them, like, my work day is 8 or 9 hours. My entire work day you're
Oh my
spending
goodness.
on TikTok scrolling, right? So it's not. it's not like the students in my class are like using this social
Wow.
platform in a positive way, right? They're scrolling.
Wow.
Um,
Wow. Wow. Wow.
so
That is a shock.
yeah, absolutely shock. And the fact that so in the behavior modification class, the challenge was, could you reduce that number? So many could not.
It
Could
sounds
not.
when you say 9 hours, hold on a second. It's
Nine
kind of like
hours.
asking someone, how much alcohol do you drink a day? Like, and they're like, well, that's like saying, I drink a 24 pack, I drink a case of beer a day, right? And you're like,
Yes.
okay. Reducing the amount of alcohol is like, we're beyond that. You need to stop
Yes.
drinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Period. All right, like we're beyond the like that is significant.
Yes. So when I asked them initially, how long do you think you spend on it? Most of them said, like, oh, I think I spend 4 or 5 hours. Then when I said, okay, let's look on your phone, and they saw it was 9 hours,
Yeah.
half of them were like, wow, that's terrible. But the other half were just like, and they couldn't change it.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's an interesting aspect. I thought you might like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So the first part of monitoring, self-monitoring and filtering is awareness. Yeah.
yes, yeah.
How are you spending your time?
Yes, because if you ask if their parents that, they probably don't realize that for sure. Obviously, right? Your response, like, "Whoa," So most people don't realize that. In my husband's kindergarten classroom,
Yeah.
over half of them have phones in
Kindergarten.
kindergarten. In kindergarten,
Kindergarten.
yeah, yep. So
Wow.
they're not allowed to use them in the class. They have to be in a
Kindergarten.
bag. But again, that kind of goes back to maybe that helicopter parenting. Parents are like, well, what if they need to call me?
Yeah.
You know, so my husband's like, well, then I'll call you. But
Yeah.
they send their kids with phones.
Luckily we're still in the generation where we can look back and we could say, well, what did we do?
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. You were all right.
We
Yes.
went to the desk at the store and we said, listen, I need to get in touch with someone. Is there a phone I can use? Right? Like
Yeah.
at least
Hmm.
we remember those times. Uh yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Or
it's,
like or you make a plan and you're there. You're like you that's another thing, right? Like with phones, if you can't make it, I can't make it. I'm gonna be 5 minutes late. No,
mhm.
like if you said you're gonna be there like before cell phones, like you had to be there.
You had to be there. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, you gotta like plan ahead a little bit. Um, yeah, this is very interesting. So things are shifting, and we're so adaptable as humans. So it sounds like it's going to take some adapting, and they're self-regulating and so forth, and
Yeah. And
paying
it can
attention
be
to
a
what we take in.
positive. Like
Yeah,
that's the thing. Like social media and phones and things, it can be a positive platform. But you have to choose that. You have to make it that way. So that's what I try and stress to the students. I'm not trying to be like some old lady, like get off your phone.
yeah,
And I use it too. I mean, I don't use it 9 hours a day for sure, but
yeah,
I don't have time. I'm working. I'm doing. So and
yeah.
so that's my other interesting thing to them is when you do graduate and you get a job, you're not going to be able to be on it for nine
Well, that's what
hours
I
a
was wondering. I'm like, do they
day.
not have enough homework? Like, do they not have enough work to do at
Yeah,
school?
they're doing it during the day, but then they're up all night too. So I'm like, you're gonna have to go to sleep earlier, and life's gonna be different on the other side. So
Yeah,
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 it's definitely
it really is interesting. Yep. Yeah, as a parent, and we have 4 kids. We have these struggles and debates, and it's very complicated because
it is.
they do connect with other people on social media, and you want your kids socially connected.
Hmm.
But then,
Hmm.
someone that grew up in like the 80s, you're thinking, well, if you want to be social, you leave the house.
Right.
That's how
Yeah.
you be social. Like,
Yeah.
what? But yeah, things have changed and shifted, and it's different. Yeah. Well, thank you for all the work that you're doing to help your community and youth in your area build
Yeah.
resilience, and
Mhm.
bounce back and find that hope for the future that's in those really good, solid social connections. That's really important.
It
So
is, it is. Yeah. And
yeah.
it's I feel very privileged that like I'm in a position that I'm able to do that too,
Mm.
because I don't want to be one of those people that just sit back and say, our youth are terrible,
Yeah,
like how it's not their fault either, right? So like
right,
how can we get them to be more positive and to find heroes in their life and just all those things, and to get off the
right.
phone. To connect more with people because these are the same kind of kids that probably their families are saying they never talk to me, they don't spend time with me, but they are
Right.
spending time just not not maybe socially with people, and that's really important too. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of
really,
work
really
to be done.
quality, like quality time, quality attention, not
Yes.
where you feel like you're pulling someone away from their phone. And can I please get 2 minutes of your time away from your phone to listen to me, Dad? Right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
And it's a
that's
big difference in a high school I went into recently. They mandated you can't have a phone in class. So when you come in the door, you have to put it in like a shoe holder.
yeah.
It was the most engaged class I've had in years. I mean,
Oh,
and they told me, this is interesting. They said they actually like it because one of the whole thing with the phones is like this FOMO, fear of missing out. Nobody can be on
yeah.
their phones during class, so they're not missing out on anything because nobody can be posting, like nobody will know any sooner. So they
Um,
can actually be fully present. Because I was trying to talk to them about mindfulness. They can
yeah.
actually do that because they don't have the phone. They just don't have the self-monitoring or the resiliency to
Hmm.
regulate themselves.
So
But
I
when
wonder if
it's
there's
the
a
rule,
connection there. Yeah. Like you
yes.
mentioned mindfulness and
Hmm.
yeah, so much of like the angst and all that is not being present, right?
Yes.
In the
Hmm.
current moment.
Hmm.
Thinking about the possible the negative parts of the past and the possibly negative parts of the future, rather than
Right.
just being
Right.
right here, right now with the people you're with.
Yeah.
And realizing right here, right now is okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I wonder if there is a connection there with if people are very much wrapped up into what's being brought in from these, the internet and apps and so
Yeah,
forth.
it's so I've been teaching for 20 years, and when I first started teaching, I literally would walk in the room and I would be like, "Okay, quiet down," because they were all talking. Now
Yeah.
when I walk in a room, it's dark, and they're all down on their phones. None of them are talking, but
Oh,
they're
yeah.
all on their phones. So
Right.
they look at it as like I'm socializing, but they never even turn the light on in the room and they don't talk to anybody in the room.
Right.
They just get on their phones. So that's such a huge difference too. Just in, like I said, 20 years. I would have to quiet down a classroom, and now I have to. Yep, I'm like,
Now
hello,
you
let's
have
get
to wake them
started.
up and say, "Hey, we're here.
Yeah,
We're here.
yeah. I
Are
say,
you here?
I'm going
I'm
to turn
here.
the
Are you
lights
here?"
on.
Yeah.
Yep. Hmm. So that,
Yeah.
again, that mindfulness, like this is where we are. This is where, let's be present now. Let's not be worrying about, because that's that anxiety piece. Anxiety is fear of the future and the what if. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
they're, on the social media, they're doing things on their phone, worrying about what may happen, which half the time doesn't really happen, but they're worried about that instead of just
Right.
talking to the person next to them. Hey, how's your day? There is none of that. So that's
Yeah.
really a sad change too. So, I'm trying
Yeah.
to get them to do more like group work and hey, this person's in your class. They've been sitting next to you for the past 15 weeks. So, they might not even know their name.
Uh, oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing what you've been seeing and what you've been doing to help out. Very helpful.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Natalie.
You're welcome. You're welcome.